Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be playing a dice game in GB Studio. So I wanted to show you guys first my art and how I set that up. We'll talk about the premise of the game and which scripts I use to achieve that. And I actually think I have an update to do based on some playthroughs of this game, so I'll take you through that as well. So this is our main scene. We'll hop right into it. This is our main scene. And what I wanted to show you guys is just the alignment of certain tiles. So we're going to be using tile switching within GB Studio. So I made sure that certain tiles were aligned to an 8x8 pixel, or an 8x8 grid, I should say. So within Sprite, you can set your grid up to make sure that that's correct by going to grid settings, 8x8. Sure, every other program has that as well, but the ones that are lined up specifically to the 8x8 squares are the two dice, or the two die, and then I'm going to have a heads-up display for player 1, player 2, and there's going to be a timer. So those are all directly lined up to 8x8 tiles, so we can switch them in and out later. So I will be using my number tile set that I have from previous videos, and I'll also be using this tile set as well for the die. So one mistake I made in setting this up is forgetting that the first tile is actually tile 0. So we have 1 through 6 here for the die, but it actually takes up 7 tiles. So when I first start, I want this one to show. But as we roll, of course, we want some values and variables to accumulate. So that's what I have here, making sure that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are actually aligned to those tiles on this tile sheet. So don't forget this one's 0 when it comes to GB Studio. So I real quickly wanted to explain the game before we hop into GB Studio. So the game is very simple. We're going to roll 2 dice, and you're going to be able to roll as many times as you want in 20 seconds to try to beat your opposing player. So the catch is, though, if your sum of your dice equals 7, your score will go back to 0. So really simple premise for the game, and next we'll talk about how we're going to accomplish that in GB Studio. So the basics of what we're going to use tile switching, random number generator, math functions, and evaluate math expressions to accomplish this game mechanic. So let's go ahead and jump right into GB Studio. So we're in GB Studio, so I'll take you through what I did, and like I said, I have an update to do based on some results of the game. So this is our basic scene, as I said. We added these 2 scenes into our assets folder. So just in case you need a refresher on that, your root folders are up here. And this is saved to my desktop on a game called Dice, and I have my backgrounds shown here, dice, dots, and number switch. So that's all I have in this game right now. So that is what's shown here. So you have dots, that's for the roll here, and number switch for the rest. So very basically, I'll take you through it in time progression as you open up the game. So the first thing I want to do is set my variables once the game initializes. So I want to set my player score to 0, my player 1 score to 0, player 2 score to 0, time to 20, dice 1, and dice 2 to 0. So all that does is set up the game one time once you log in, or I should say once you hop into the game. You will be able to have those set up for you. So that's a really easy command. You just type in set variable to value. It's actually called variable set to value. But in there, pick your variable that I have set up, and you can set it to a value. You can actually change it to a bunch of different things. But just to keep it basic, we do number. So I'll delete that one. So we set everything up. We hide the player. In this case, we don't have a top-down scene. We're just going to have I actually sent it to point and click, but it doesn't really matter. I just want to hide my player because there's really no player in the game. So as we set the variables, these 2 things are really connected. So I have a gbvm script, which is vm replace tile _xy. I'll put that up on the screen for you to see a lot easier. to take these variables and display them for the player. So remember, we need to set the variables, and then we need to tell it to wander over to this sheet and pull the number back and show it to the player. So in this case, what I'm telling this one is telling it to do is time VM replace tile XY at 1316. That's this tile right here, which can be seen over here. X equals 13, Y equals 16. And then you use your references, bank, BG number switch, that's this, tile set, and then you have to type in var underscore time, which is what we set up there. So I have all those in. So we have time, we have player 1 score, player 2 score, and the die are going to flip every time we roll. So that's all just happens kind of in an instant when you log into the game. Those things will switch in for you. So next, what I want to happen when the player presses the A button, I want it to roll the dice. So I don't really have motion to this because I wanted it to be kind of simple. This only took me about 30 minutes to set up. But what I use instead is an overlay. So it'll show an overlay almost like there's a roll or kind of like an action happening. And the overlay will only be up for a very short amount of time, but a lot happens. So I have these are event groups, player 1 action, player 2 action, help me keep organized. But what I want to happen is I want dice 1 to be set to a random value between 1 and 6. So that command is going to be math function. So there you can select what you want. So dice, add, and then you can do value, select your value. Or in this case, what I actually want to do is set to a random number between 1 and 6. So that's exactly what we have already up there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So I did that for dice 2. So these 2 die are going to throw me a random number between 1 and 6. Exactly how a dice works. So there is some discussion about the randomness of the numbers you get in GB Studio. So there's a GB Studio Central article on that. And you know what, actually, another thing I need to do is, let's see, I'm going to insert an event before. So don't forget about seed random number generator. So what that does is make sure that the random numbers are different between playthroughs. Places to run in response to user input to ensure random numbers change between playthroughs. So I've talked about that before, but make sure that is in there before this whole thing goes down. So the next one is actually a evaluate math expression. Right, it's that command right there. So what I use that for is adding variables together. So what I want to happen is when you roll the dice, you add them up, and that gets added to your score. So I made a new variable called player 1's turn, and I said add together dice 1 and dice 2. Too easy, right? So that value is stored in player 1's turn. Now, as I said previously, my catch to this game is if you roll a 7, player 1's score goes to 0. So you can roll a bunch, but if you hit a 7, you're going back to 0. So I did an if-then statement. If player 1 turn equals 7, so if the sum of the die equals 7, set player score to 1. So for that command, it's if variable compare with value. There you go. If variable compare with the value. So I'm going to say if this variable equals 7, set player 1 score to 0. If not, if else, player 1's score now equals what they previously had, player 1's score, plus player 1's turn. And this is another evaluate math expression. So once again, if we're adding variables, I like to use evaluate math expression. So that's all player 1's actions. They roll, they get a random number, 2 random numbers, The die will be added up. If they add up to 7, it goes to 0. If not, they get the points. So they have 20 seconds. You can roll as many times as you want, but basically, if you run out of time or you bust 100, if you get to 100, you'll win as player 1. Or, when the time runs out, it's going to compare your scores. So what I try to do is for player 2 is take a shortcut, and this is what I want to update after I show you all a playthrough. What I try to do is just say player 2 turn random between 2 and 12. So the reason why that does not work is because that gives player 2 a more likely chance to hit a 7. So what was happening is basically player 2 was hitting 7s too much, and it was just like an automatic win for player 1. So I'm going to fix that during this video. So basically I'm going to make die 3 and die 4. I'm basically going to copy what I have up here in more detail, so this doesn't happen. Because just conceptually, there's more of a chance for them to get a 7 when you're going only between 2 and 12, and then compared to rolling these die separately. So once again, though, if player 2 rolls a 7, they hit 0, and then I have another math expression. The score will be their turn plus their current score. And that all happens in a blank, right? The overlay shows up for half a second or less, probably less, maybe 0.2 seconds, so I can do all this, and then it goes away. So it's very quick. So that's pretty much the game mechanic at work. So I have a few other things happening in the background to show. So as I have my 2 stealth actors here, one is updating the tiles and checking to see who won, and one is just running the timer. So as I've done in some previous videos, this is the timer. So I want this timer to be set for 20 and just counts down. And then there'll be an event once it hits 0. So I put this one separately so there's nothing stopping this 1 second wait from happening. But it's very simple. On update, wait for 1 second. The time variable, this is another math function. And I use that because I want it to stop at 0. But I did time, subtract value 1 every 1 second. Pretty basic. And then the script of the GBVM is what's updating this tile right here. So every second it's pulling the next tile over so the player can see how much time's left. So that is the timer. Pretty basic. So this one is updating the tiles, player 1 score and player 2 score. So I have the same script, the GBVM scripts, just pasted into this update. Make sure you do on update. So on update, as you guys know, it's just constantly pulling the data to see what the variable is and what the square that it needs to pull over in this case. So we put that in on update for this one, just so it can constantly run. So we have player 1 score, player 2 score, dice 1, dice 2, so it can flip these dots into place. So now I have another event group on here called winning. So this is going to constantly check for these things. If player 1's score gets to 100, player 1 wins. Very basic. And I want it to display this text box, player 1 wins. Same thing for player 2. And then the last one I have is if they run out of time, time equals 0. If player 1's score is greater than player 2's score, player 1 wins. If not, player 2 wins. So this command right here is called variable compare with variable. Right there. Variable compare with variable. So if some variable, it's saying if some variable compared to some other variable, do something. So that's what I used. So next we'll go ahead and do a playthrough so you guys can see what it looks like. Alright guys, so I'll go ahead and show you how it looks. We're already using 2 seconds, but here we go. I'm going to do some rolls. You can see the time's ticking down, which is good. We have scores accumulating and we have the die showing different dots. Oh, we both rolled a 7. Interesting. Okay. So like I said, what I need to fix, which I'll do I'll do now is that it seems much more likely for player 2 to hit a 7. And pretty much player 1 wins every time. Then, as I'm saying that, it means that player 2 won. Look at that. Okay. So, of course, as I'm saying that, the other thing happens. But thinking through it, I want to make it more even. So, what I'm going to do is kind of copy this right here for player 2 instead of this just random between 2 and 12. So I'm kind of going to copy these and then edit them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it dice 3 and 4, and we don't need to tile switch those because we're not showing player 2's die, so we don't need to worry about that. So this shouldn't be that hard to fix. I just need to make a couple variables. Make this dice 3. Set to, yep. So dice 3 and 4 basically belong to player 2, which is fine. Dice 4, set to a random value. Okay. Now player, we already have player 2's turn. We're going to reuse that. And we're going to change this to... So when you're doing this, one thing I didn't mention before, if you want to use math expression and you want to use a variable, you must type the $sign to let the program know that you're wanting a variable. So player 2's turn equals dice 3 plus dice 4, and I think we're missing one other thing. Nope, no, we're good. So it's going to go right into the same sequence again. If player 2's turn, which is the sum of the die each time it's rolled, equals 7, set player score to 0. If not, player 2's score now is player 2's turn plus player 2's score. So that should have updated it. So let's run it again, see what happens. So you wouldn't really necessarily play this as a standalone game, but maybe you want to put it at the beginning of a game or a sequence that you're working on within a game where you want some kind of random dice roll to start. Something you can definitely use to assign rolls or something like that. All right. Okay, so player 2 score is updating, so that's good. Ours is updating, and it's correct. Let's see. Okay, so I hit it. Of course, I'm talking about how... Oh, there we go. Quick switch. I didn't know this game would be so dramatic. So as I said, I was talking about how, player 1 doesn't... or player 2 tends to get more 7s in these playthroughs. It's been player 1. It just happened again. Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't think player 1 can win. Well, he could have. He could have won if player 2 hit a 7. All right, so player 2 won again. But anyway, I'm feeling better about how that's set up. I feel like it's more fair for player 2. And the nice thing about this is too, guys, you have your build log and your debugger down here that'll show you the things changing. So if something's going wrong where your tiles aren't switching, you can at least see if your variables are changing. That's what I do a lot. I'll just show you that real quick. So let me know, how would you guys use this? Does this make any sense, or is this some kind of random thing that I made? Obviously, it's a random thing, pun intended, but something to think about, something I thought of that was similar to my card game, but wanted to do something a little bit different. So as you guys can see, these variables do change down here every time you press it, which is good, which is what you want. So you can kind of see if your images are messed up, you can see if the variables are working down here. What's up with dice 2 here? Why is dice 2 stuck on number 1? Okay, now. Yeah, that's just a bad, not bad coincidence, I guess. I smoked him that time. All right, so that's something to look at, right? Those variables as you're going. You can maybe identify issues. But anyway, this is the dice game. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you would use it. And I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.